I was never one to believe in fate or omens, but if you asked me to pick the moment everything went downhill, I'd say it was the day a support beam gave way at the construction site. My name is Everett. I'm 42, and until recently I thought my life was on relatively stable ground. I had a wife named Barbara, 39 years old, witty when she wanted to be, distant when she didn't, and a 16-year-old stepson, Gage, who came into my life floating on a wave of adolescent attitude. He was 8 when I married Barbara, but from the start it felt like I was the outsider. Still, I tried my best. I built him a tree house, taught him the basics of fishing, took him to the batting cage a couple of times. We had our moments of connection, but beneath that veneer of a blended family lay something rotten none of us could fully name. Barbara and I had been married 8 years. We'd created a life built on habit more than love, but I'd convinced myself routine was enough. That's how it went. Morning coffee, the same inside jokes, the same date nights at the same restaurant. We rarely fought, but we rarely did anything else either. It was inoffensive and comfortable, and maybe in hindsight, that was part of the problem. I told myself we were happy, that I was providing, that if her son didn't want to open up, that was just teenage stuff. I ignored every red flag, like the time she'd disappear on girls' weekends or the nights she'd be glued to her phone, whispering about someone from work. I needed a 2x4 to the skull to wake up. Turns out I got that and more when the support beam collapsed at my site. I broke my leg in multiple places. 3 ribs shattered, punctured a lung, nearly bled out. The doctors kept talking about how lucky I was to have survived. It was pure agony. My leg was in traction. Tubes sprouted from my nose and chest. The nights in the hospital blurred into each other. Half-remembered visitors, the squeak of gurneys in the hall, the beep of machines. My sister Bernice came by every day, bringing me homemade soup and updates on my dog Curtis. She stayed during the nights I was in major pain. She was my rock. And my wife, you ask? Barbara never showed. Not the first day, not the 5th, not the 10th. We'd been married 8 years, and she couldn't be bothered to drive 40 minutes to see her husband who'd nearly died. I tried calling. The first time, she groaned that Gage had a game and she couldn't make it. The second time, she claimed Curtis was sick. The third time, it went to voicemail. Around day 5, I started panicking, wondering if she was in a car accident herself or something. But Bernice had calming words. "You know your wife, Ev," she said gently. "She always does what benefits her." I still wanted to believe there was a reason, but then a week became 10 days, 2 weeks 3. The pitying looks from the nurses were worse than the actual pain in my body. Tessa, a nurse, occasionally sat on the edge of my bed and offered an extra pudding or just a hand to hold. She never asked why my wife wasn't coming, but I could see the question in her eyes. When I finally got Barbara on the phone nearly 4 weeks into my hospital stay, her voice was casual, like she was chatting to a distant cousin. When I asked if she was coming, she said, "You're not worth the gas money. Die fast or heal quick because I'm tired of this in between." That was the exact moment the bubble of denial popped. I remember dropping my phone onto the scratchy hospital blanket, hearing her voice tinny and distant. Then Gage picked up. "We don't miss you," he said with a teenage snicker, and then hung up. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, letting the beep of the heart monitor confirm I was still alive. Let me tell you, pain meds can numb your body, but not that kind of hurt. I spent sleepless nights replaying everything in my head, from the day I met Barbara to every snide comment from Gage. I wondered how I missed the cracks blooming through our marriage. And each day, Bernice brought me a new piece of evidence. My bank account had strange withdrawals, jewelry store receipts we definitely hadn't discussed, mysterious plane tickets to Cancun. All this in the middle of me being stuck with tubes and a ventilator, barely able to breathe on my own. She was funneling money out, our money, and setting it aside for herself, and as I'd soon learn, for someone else. A neighbor named Silvio, who'd only moved in 6 months ago, was helping her fix all the little problems around the house while I was out of commission. "Think about it," Bernice said, arms folded as she gave me the latest bank statement. "While you're lying here, she's living it up with this clown. Are you going to just sit here?" She knew me well enough to know that once I'd decided on a course of action, I'd follow it through. But first, I had to get out of that damn hospital. My doctor insisted I needed at least another 3 weeks of close monitoring. The risk of infection post-surgery was immense. My right leg was riddled with metal rods, and I still had trouble breathing deeply. The nurse, Tessa, tried to talk me out of leaving, but I'd had enough. So I signed myself out against medical advice, AMA, and had Bernice drive me to a Staybridge extended stay hotel. It was about time I reclaimed an iota of power in my own life. My sister was wary. "You sure about this, Ev? What if something goes wrong?" But I told her that staying in that hospital bed was making me feel more like a victim with every passing day. At least outside those walls, I had a fighting chance to salvage what was left. The first night at that hotel was one of the loneliest nights of my life. There were no beeping machines, no quiet footsteps in the corridor. Just me, my messed up leg in a brace, and the knowledge that the wife I trusted was spending joint assets on a fling. I spent days planning. I opened my own checking account at a new bank and secured all crucial documents. I didn't tell Barbara I'd left the hospital, only that I was going to be in a while longer. She answered with a thumbs-up emoji. That was it. Classic Barbara. When she didn't have a script ready, she either vanished or responded with an indifferent text. My biggest move came when Bernice told me Barbara was headed to Nashville with some friends for a little weekend getaway. She called it a girls' trip, but I strongly suspected Silvio would be there, or at least some other distraction. I decided that was D-Day, the day I'd do the unthinkable and orchestrate what I dubbed Operation Empty House. It wasn't an impulse. I consulted a lawyer named Reggie. Guy showed up to my hotel in jeans and sneakers, but he knew his stuff. "You want a divorce or you want to separate?" he asked me, fiddling with his tablet. I responded without hesitation, "Divorce." The talk that followed was sobering. He outlined that in our state, I was entitled to half of the marital assets. I just needed to be methodical and stick to what was mine by law. "Make a list of everything you owned before you got married," he said. "Then do a separate list for anything you bought jointly. We'll split that fairly. No more, no less." I spent hours on that list. Bernice rummaged around the house one afternoon when Barbara was at work and photographed the furniture, the electronics, even the silverware. I tracked everything, from the living room set we'd purchased together to the bedroom set I had before our marriage ever began. We arranged for a moving company, booked them for a Saturday, right in the middle of Barbara's Nashville escapade. It was going to be a swift, merciless extraction. Since I was hobbling around with crutches, Bernice would supervise most of the physical labor, but I wanted to be there too, to witness as my illusions dissolved. The big day arrived. Saturday, 8 a.m., a giant truck rolled up in front of a house I hadn't seen in over 2 months. As the movers hopped out, Bernice gave me a look. "Last chance to back out," she teased, though her eyes were serious. "I've come this far," I replied, "no turning back." Walking into my own home felt surreal. Curtis came barreling down the stairs, nails scrabbling on the floor. He jumped and licked my face until I nearly toppled over. I'd missed him so much. Meanwhile, the house was disturbingly tidy, not a speck of dust in sight. The woman who never once vacuumed for me evidently picked up cleaning skills for Silvio. I felt bitterness burning through me. We started systematically taking my stuff. The bedroom set I'd had pre-marriage, the coffee table we'd bought together, half the kitchen appliances, since Reggie said that was fair, the big screen TV, my old recliner, my work tools from the garage. The only place we hesitated was Gage's room. I'd spent years trying to bond with him, though he made it challenging. But as far as the property was concerned, Reggie's stance was that my funds had bought a pretty fancy gaming system last Christmas. I ended up taking it. Part of me wanted to say the kid's just a teen, but recalling how he told me he didn't miss me and that his mother basically bribed him to say it, swayed me. So I marched out with the console in tow, ignoring the pinch of guilt. By 4 in the afternoon, the house was half emptied. Every mover had the same stony expression, as though we were a SWAT team raiding a place. They worked fast, careful to follow my itemized list so that we took nothing but what legally belonged to me. Barbara's vanity, her clothes, her knickknacks all stayed behind. I didn't want them anyway. We had a pizza break on the living room floor, boxes all around us. The silence felt massive until one of the movers said, "Hey man, tough situation, huh?" I just nodded and took another bite, focusing my energy on the spicy pepperoni rather than the gnawing sense of betrayal in my gut. Around 7, the truck was loaded. I locked up the house behind me. Maybe I should have left a note, but I decided I'd let her walk into the emptiness without warning. That was the poetic justice I wanted. Back at my new apartment, it was chaos. Boxes and furniture were strewn everywhere. The pain in my leg flared, and exhaustion weighed me down. But there was a dark part of me that felt triumphant, like I'd just delivered the first real blow in a war I didn't start. I slept that night amid boxes of my own clothes. Curtis curled at my feet on the bed as though trying to reassure me life would go on. I'd timed everything so that Barbara would return Sunday evening from her big trip. I expected calls, texts, threats, tears, all of it. But I wasn't quite prepared for the barrage that hit. My phone lit up around 7 p.m. with a series of texts. "Where is all our stuff? Everett, you can't be serious. You creep, you took Curtis? This is illegal. You're not getting away with this. Call me now or you'll regret it." I read them quietly, heart pounding. Obviously, she'd discovered the changes. The phone started ringing almost continuously. Finally, I switched it off. There was nothing she could say that I wanted to hear. Bernice, though, had a doorbell camera across the street, and she sent me a short clip. Barbara was outside the house, leash in hand, screaming at the empty driveway, her voice shrill. "He took everything, even the dog. He can't do this to me." I watched that clip repeatedly, noticing how she performed her outrage for the neighbors, hair disheveled, arms flying everywhere. I found my hand settling on Curtis's thick scruff. "Yeah, buddy," I whispered. "She didn't deserve you." I stayed low for a while, ignoring Barbara's threats. My attorney, Reggie, assured me I was in the right. We filed for divorce. Meanwhile, Gage texted me out of the blue about a week later. "Hey," he wrote, no punctuation. "Can I come over?" My first instinct was to ignore him, given everything that had happened. But curiosity won out. I told him if he wanted to talk, he should do it in person. That Sunday, he showed up at my new place, shoulders hunched, expression shaky. He mumbled something about how messed up everything was at home, how Barbara was raging, how Sylvia was around all the time, acting like he'd replaced me entirely. Then Gage admitted something. "Mom wanted me to say that stuff to you on the phone. She was tired of you calling and wanted you to give up. Told me she'd get me the new VR system if I said we didn't miss you." I stared at him, the anger in my gut twisting. Part of me wanted to throw him out, but the kid was 16. Maybe he was impressionable. Maybe he believed he'd lost any chance at a real father figure, so he latched on to barbaric self-preservation. In the end, I just said, "Well, did you get the new VR after you said it?" Gage looked down at his shoes. "Yeah." That told me everything I needed to know. Barbara bribed loyalty out of him. Didn't matter. I told him I had no room for manipulations anymore. A few days later, life took another turn. My wife's fling, Silvio, decided to make a grand appearance while I was grocery shopping. I limped through the aisles, picking out some frozen dinners and fruit. And who do I see by the deli counter but the clown himself? Muscular guy, wearing a tight shirt, sleazy grin. He spotted me, walked right up with a smug smirk. "Hey, big man, saw you cleared out the house. Seems dramatic." He spoke like we were old buddies discussing a minor inconvenience. My blood boiled. I gripped my cart. "That's not your concern," I said curtly, trying to keep my composure. He chuckled. "Barbara's got a mouth on her, you know. She's been telling everyone how you're unstable, how you can't handle your leg injury. But I'm sure you'll manage," he winked, glancing at my braced leg. I felt my heart pounding, the leftover adrenaline from the accident flaring. "You keep Barbara's name out of your mouth," I said low, ignoring the fact that I was divorcing her. "And you stay the hell away from me." People in the store were starting to stare. He leaned forward, voice dropping to a taunting whisper. "You're not half the man you think you are. Now that she's free, we'll see who she really wants." It was probably stupid, but I snapped. Dropping my groceries, I lunged forward and shoved him. It wasn't a punch, but I channeled all my anger into it. He stumbled back, nearly crashing into a display of chips. "What the?" he said, eyes wide. Then came the moment that still replays in my head. I slapped him. Not a punch, not a push. A full palm across the face that cracked like a gunshot in that grocery store aisle. He spun with it, and a hush fell around us. I muttered, "That's for sneaking around with my wife," and turned my back on him. A manager ran over, threatening to call security. Silvio dabbed at the side of his lip like I'd drawn blood, but it was only red from humiliation. The manager asked if we both wanted to leave quietly or have the cops called. I huffed. "I'm done here." I crutched my way out of there, leaving my cart behind. My heart hammered. Before I drove off, I saw Silvio storm out, raging into his phone, probably calling Barbara. Let him talk. I was past caring. Days passed. My body demanded physical therapy, so I still saw Tessa from the hospital sometimes. She'd changed hospitals, but we kept in loose touch. We had coffee once, and she tiptoed around the subject of my marriage. When I explained what happened, she just shook her head. Everett, she said softly. I'm sorry that happened to you. She had a gentleness that Barbara never possessed, but I was a mess, not ready for anything more than a decent conversation. Still, it felt good not to feel so alone. Then came the day Barbara decided to escalate everything. She scheduled yet another girls' trip, this time to celebrate moving on from me. In her mind, going to Nashville once more with her pals was the perfect way to blow off steam while her divorce was choking in legalities. Meanwhile, my sister Bernice discovered that our remaining funds had gone suspiciously low. Barbara was probably paying for a weekend of partying with the last bits of our joint savings, money the court hadn't frozen yet. I saw red. I decided if she wanted to gallivant off to Nashville for a cheating party, well, let her. But this time I'd be there, at my old house, to greet her face to face when she returned. I was done hiding in my safe new apartment. I made sure to get all the legal disclaimers from Reggie, just in case she tried to get me on trespassing. The property was still in both our names, so I had every right to step foot on that lawn. Early Saturday morning, I parked down the street so the neighbors wouldn't notice me. I was still limping, but determined. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized I was no doormat. Sure enough, she came home a day early, Sunday afternoon, rolling a suitcase up the walkway. I emerged from the backyard, Curtis at my side, quiet as I could be. She turned, seeing me, eyes bulging like she'd spotted a ghost. "What the hell are you doing here?" she hissed, dropping her suitcase. "You can't just show up unannounced." I stayed calm. "I can. My name's on the deed, remember? Or did you forget that when you were blowing our money in Nashville?" She tried to sneer, but ended up looking cornered. "I needed a break. Gage is driving me insane, and your disappearing act was—" I laughed coldly. "My disappearing act? Lady, I was in the hospital. Then you told me to die or heal quickly so you wouldn't be inconvenienced. Ring a bell?" She rolled her eyes. "Stop acting like a victim. If you'd been a better provider, a better husband—" I cut her off. "Don't even start that. You spent months cheating on me with Silvio." Her mouth tightened. "You can't prove that." I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. We're done, Barbara. But I wanted to see your face when you realized you can't push me around anymore." Her eyes flickered to the dog, who was sniffing around the patio. "Give Curtis back," she snapped suddenly. "He's mine." My eyebrows went up. "Oh, now he's yours? You barely fed him, never walked him. You only wanted him around when it suited you. Sorry, but that dog's not leaving my side." She advanced a step, a feral anger in her eyes I'd never quite witnessed before. "You piece of trash, you walk into my house—" "Half mine," I corrected. "And you have the nerve to stand there like everything's my fault." I took a breath, feeling my leg ache. "Doesn't matter whose fault it is, we're divorcing. You took my money, you took my trust, and now you think I owe you more? No. I just came to see if you have the guts to say anything real to my face." On a dime, she lunged for me. "You want something real?" she screamed. "I'll give you real." Her hands went for my shirt, nails raking my chest. The ring she still wore glinted under the sun, and she kicked for my injured leg. Instinct took over, and I stepped back, trying not to lose my balance. She stumbled, lost traction near the pool, and I sidestepped her the same moment she tried to grab my arm. That scuffle ended with me giving her a firm push to get her off me. She flailed, arms pinwheeling, letting out a shriek as her body pitched backward, straight into the pool. The splash was thunderous. I hobbled to the edge, watching her sputter, hair plastered over her face. She coughed, enraged. "You asshole!" she screamed, wading in the shallow end. Water dripped from her mascara-streaked face. I just stood there, panting, adrenaline roaring in my ears. "Don't ever touch me again," I said. "I mean it," Curtis barked, as though seconding my statement. For a split second, something like fear flickered in her eyes. Then it morphed into white-hot fury. "You're going to pay for this," she spat, pushing wet clumps of hair out of her eyes. "I'll ruin you." I snorted, a humorless sound. "Good luck. You've already done your worst. I'm still here." Then I turned and left her there, floundering in the water. I didn't care if the neighbors saw. This was the real Barbara, all wrath and arrogance. For the first time, I let myself acknowledge I felt not only betrayal, but also an odd thrill. I'd stood up to her, refused to be her doormat. Does that make me a villain? Maybe. But I'll tell you what, every villain has a limit to how much they'll take before they snap. I didn't hear from her the rest of that day. I suspected she was nursing her pride or maybe calling Silvio for comfort. Let her. I went home to my apartment and flopped on the couch, exhausted. My phone was quiet until it buzzed around 6 in the evening. The caller ID read Gage. I let it ring, but the kid left a voicemail. Everett, we gotta talk, man. It's important. His tone sounded urgent in a teenage, whiny sort of way. I sighed and called him back. He asked if he could come over, said it was about college and how all the money was supposedly gone now. How Barbara kept saying I needed to pay because it's your job. I told him if he wanted a conversation, do it face to face. So he agreed to come by the next morning. I figured we'd have a calm talk about finances. Maybe walk him through scholarship options. I was fine being rational, though my empathy for him was wearing thin. The next day, Gage arrived around noon. He barged into my apartment stairs with a scowl on his face, arms crossed. He didn't even glance at Curtis, who wagged his tail and came straight to me. "Mom says you locked up the accounts," he announced without greeting. "She said you're not paying for my college, and I need that money." I leaned on my crutch, trying to even out my breathing. "Hello to you too, Gage. Nice to see you," he huffed. "Whatever. I'm serious. I'm going to start applying to schools, and she said you took all the funds. Dad?" He stopped abruptly, as though realizing he never really called me Dad before. "Or Everett, whatever. You gotta pay. That's how this works. You married my mom. You're supposed to take care of us." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Am I, though? Because from where I stand, you and your mom made it clear you didn't need me. You specifically said you didn't miss me at all. Just wanted me gone. Hate to break it to you, but one of the consequences of that is that I'm not your personal ATM." Gage turned red. "That was Mom's idea, okay? She said if I told you that, you'd quit dragging things out. She said you were too soft." I raised a brow. "Well, it looks like I'm not so soft anymore. You can apply for scholarships, get a part-time job, or ask your mom about where all that money really went. Maybe Silvio can pitch in with his handy neighbor wages." He glared at me, fury rolling off him in waves. "Don't you talk about Silvio like that." "Oh, come on," I said with an eye roll. "I know what he is, and frankly, you should too. He's the reason your mom never visited me in the hospital. She had him around instead. It's not my problem," Gage shouted, fists clenched. "I just want my damn college money. If you don't pay, I'll make your life miserable. You got that? You'll regret it big time." The threat hung in the air. I felt the inside of my chest tighten. I might be the villain in some eyes, but I wasn't going to cower before a bratty teenager. "You better get the hell out of my face," I said in a low growl. "I'm tired of both of you thinking I owe you anything. You want me to pay for your college? Not happening. Now go home." He slammed his heel into the side of my coffee table, sending a jolt of pain through my leg as I jumped a little.
"Screw you!" he snapped.
"You can't do this to me." I forcibly turned him around, opened the door, and shoved him out. "Yes, I can," I said, voice trembling with anger. "Go cry to your mother, now!" I slammed the door shut. My heart was pounding. I pressed my back to the door, taking deep breaths. Through the wood, I heard him cursing, calling me every name in the book. Then the footsteps receded, but it wasn't over. Within minutes, I heard thumps outside. Then a crash. Adrenaline shot through me. I opened the door and saw Gage swinging a brick at my car window. The side mirror was already shattered on the ground, and the windshield spiderwebbed under the impact. "You worthless old bastard!" he screamed, face twisted in rage. "Pay for my college, or I'll make you pay another way!" I couldn't believe the raw entitlement. "You piece of—" I started, storming toward him as best as I could with my limp. "Drop the brick!" He slammed it again, cracking the glass further, then scratched the paint on the door, leaving long silver scars. "This is what you get!" he shouted. My neighbors were peeking out of windows. Curtis barked madly. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. "I'm done playing," I said, staring Gage in the eye. "You're going to jail, boy." He kept swearing, took one final swing at the hood, then tried to bolt. But the police, thankfully quick that day, showed up before he got too far. They came in with lights flashing. 2 officers leaped out, drawing on Gage. "Hands in the air," they commanded. Gage dropped the brick, tears of rage wetting his cheeks. "He won't pay for my future," he shrieked in a meltdown. The officers pushed him onto the ground, cuffing him. One gave me a quick nod. "You want to press charges, sir?" I swallowed thickly. "He trespassed and destroyed my property," I said vaguely, voice shaking. Yes, I do." They hauled Gage upright, panting. He glared daggers at me. "You're gonna regret this," he spat. "You'll see. Mom will fix this. I'll get out and I'll come back." I said nothing. My first impulse was to unleash more anger, but I was so exhausted. I just watched as they put him into the cruiser, shut the door, and took him away. Neighbors gaped from their porches, filming the scene on their phones. I turned away, not wanting to see their expressions. Pity, confusion, maybe condemnation. Didn't matter. I was done letting Barbara and Gage bleed me dry. In the aftermath, I filed a formal complaint. The legal system forced him to appear in juvenile court for trespassing and property damage. The judge gave him a fine, mandated some form of anger management, and obliged him to pay restitution for the damage to my car. $1,000 or so for the broken glass and paint job. The kid was furious, and Barbara tried to intervene, claiming I'd attacked him first. But the doorbell camera footage from my neighbor's angle was pretty clear. Gage was the aggressor. Even the stuff he'd screamed was on record. 100 smaller messes followed in the days after. Insurance claims on my car, police statements to confirm the timeline, urgent texts from Barbara claiming I was ruining Gage's life. Ruining it by daring to defend myself, right? My sister Bernice said I should try to find some measure of peace, that the conflict was devouring me. Peace wasn't easy to find. I was consumed with a swirling cocktail of anger, betrayal, heartbreak, and twisted satisfaction that I was finally striking back. I'd like to say that was the end of the fiasco, but you don't disentangle 8 years overnight. A few days later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Silvio, calling me from some unknown number, probably to gloat or threaten. I let it ring, but he left a voicemail. "Tough guy, I watched the video of you pushing Barbara in the pool. Real nice. Why don't you come talk to me like a man? You want to put your hands on someone? You put them on me." I shook my head, mostly exasperated that he was trying to goad me into a brawl. I hit delete. If he wanted a face-off, he'd have to catch me out somewhere. I wasn't stepping onto his turf or letting him onto mine. The court set a date for the divorce proceedings. Barbara contested certain property divisions. She claimed she needed the house, that I'd stolen shared property, including her dog. Reggie calmly reminded her we had thorough documentation. She backed down on the dog and started playing the victim about the house. Meanwhile, the sale was inevitable. We had a joint mortgage. The final hearing was a month down the line, so I braced myself for a drawn-out, seething fight in front of a judge. I also prepared an ironclad account of every expense and every dime Barbara had withdrawn. The Cancun tickets, the jewelry for Silvio, the nights out, all of it. She didn't stand a chance, legally speaking. During those weeks, Gage's case ended with a fine and mandated restitution. He started texting me from random burner apps, peppering me with curses and insults. I blocked each new number, let him rage. My therapist from the hospital had warned me that emotional stress could slow my physical recovery, so I tried to channel my anger into my rehab exercises. Strangely, that contributed to faster progress. By the time we approached the final court date, I no longer needed crutches, just a stiff brace for my leg to keep it stable. The day of the divorce hearing, I walked into the courtroom wearing a decent suit with Reggie at my side. Barbara sat with her lawyer, arms folded, tapping her foot, eyes darting around. Gage was nowhere in sight. Probably a good thing. Silvio also didn't appear. Maybe he left her, or maybe he didn't want the drama of a public setting. The judge was stern but fair, flipping through the paperwork. He asked Barbara if she had any final arguments for contesting the property division. She fumbled, glancing at her lawyer. He coughed and shook his head. It was done in less than an hour. The marriage was dissolved, the house would be sold, proceeds split equally, each of us parted ways with the assets clearly enumerated. Afterwards, in the hallway, Barbara tried to corner me one last time. She hesitated, eyes shining with tears. "I don't know how everything fell apart so fast." I gave her a cold stare. "You gave up on me when you told me I wasn't worth the gas money. Actually, you gave up way before that. That's how." She wiped a tear. I was angry, and Silvio was there, but he didn't stick around. None of them do. Her voice trembled. I almost felt sorry for her, despite everything. But that feeling passed quickly. "That's your problem, not mine," I said, turning to limp away. "Take care, Barbara." That was that. Weeks later, the house sold quickly. Market was hot, and we split the proceeds. Reggie verified the check cleared into my new account. I used some for medical bills and put the rest aside for a fresh start. Meanwhile, Gage was apparently living with Barbara in a small condo she found, slogging through mandatory anger management. He never apologized for the car incident. Maybe one day, he'll realize that actions have consequences. As for me, I kept going to physical therapy. Tessa and I ended up meeting outside of the hospital environment a few times for coffee and dinner. When she found out how everything ended, she gave me a small, sympathetic smile and said, "You went through hell, Everett, but now maybe life can start again." She had a calm way of seeing the bright side. I wasn't ready to jump into anything serious, but I appreciated the kindness. A few months passed quietly. The legal dust settled, and my leg, scarred and stiff, improved to the point where I could handle longer walks with Curtis without wincing every 5 steps. The tension in my chest eased, though I sometimes dreamed about the day that beam collapsed, the day everything about my life was laid bare. Barbara's phone calls dwindled to near zero, though she sometimes left pitiful voicemails about how Gage needed a father figure or maybe we should talk about the future. I erased them all without responding. Now, with the final chapter behind me, I can say that I'm living in a reality I never thought I'd want. Single, with a slight limp in a modest apartment that smells of dog kibble and fresh ambitions. I have no illusions about whether I was cruel and how I took everything. Maybe I was. But after the betrayal, the hospital abandonment, and the violence from both Barbara and Gage, I don't lose sleep over it. For completeness, let me tack on these last details. Eventually, Gage faced a hearing for that vandalism charge. The judge wasn't amused by his sense of entitlement. He received a fine of several $100s, mandatory community service hours, and had to pay me back for my car repairs. Rage clouded his expression, but he knew he had no escape. Barbara actually tried to beg me to drop the charges, said she'd pay me back and keep it out of court, but I refused. I was done letting them walk all over me. Sometimes respect is only earned by showing you won't be a punching bag anymore. And Silvio, well, he showed his face around the neighborhood for a bit, but most neighbors saw him as a snake. He eventually moved out, probably looking for new prey or a new place where people didn't know his track record. My last real contact with him was in the grocery store that day I slapped him. So I guess that was his farewell from me. Barbara, she's out there, telling her version of the story, probably painting me as the monster who took everything. I won't deny I played rough in the end. But after the months of cold neglect and her affair, I guess I embraced my own inner villain. She can label me however she wants. At least I can look in the mirror and know I broke the cycle of letting everyone else use me. If that's villainy, so be it. So that's that. The kidnapping of my own dog, the empty house, the hospital betrayal, the push into the pool, the brick through my windshield, the final swirl of cops and divorce settlements. It's one hell of a story. But it's also my life, or at least it was. Now I'm free. My sister Bernice and I are closer than ever. Tess has become a surprising friend, someone who actually asks how I'm doing rather than how I can serve her needs. Curtis is living his best dog life, his chin on my lap right now as I wrap up this final piece of reflecting. And me, I'm picking up more shifts as an on-site supervisor. No heavy lifting quite yet, but enough to pay the bills and reestablish my place in the world. For all the havoc and destruction, if you asked me today whether I regret how I handled things, emptying the house, calling the cops on Gage, slapping Silvio in a grocery aisle, I wouldn't know. My older self might have said yes, maybe I could have been kinder, more patient, but the me who lay alone in the hospital for 51 days waiting for a wife who never arrived, the me who listened to her words, "You're not worth the gas money, die fast or heal quick," that me believes I only responded as strongly as I needed to. People show you who they are in moments of crisis. She showed me she was self-serving, and so I protected myself the only way I could. And in the end, as messed up as it sounds, I think everyone got what they deserved. Barbara discovered the emptiness she'd created. Gage discovered that lashing out with a brick and screaming threats only leads to real consequences. Silvio discovered that sneaking around with another man's wife wasn't exactly a ticket to paradise. Oddly enough, I discovered resilience in myself, so here I am a few months down the road writing this last reflection in a quiet living room. There's a small potted plant in the window, leftover boxes from the hardware store in the corner, still haven't fully finished setting up new furniture, and an old recliner that squeaks every time I shift. Curtis sighs contentedly, and for a brief second, I let myself think about how I used to watch Barbara scrolling through her phone, waiting for me to leave so she could call Silvio. Or how Gage once ran into my arms when he was 9 and scraped his elbow. So many complicated memories. I allow them to surface, then let them fade. Because the final word is this. It's done. The legal battles are over, the house is sold, the money is split, the apologies never came and maybe never will. I'm okay with that. I'm not waiting for remorse to fix me. I'm not going back to that hospital bed in my mind, waiting and hoping for someone to care. I have to be the one who cares about me. And I do. 100 words about how that mess concluded. Here they are. Gage was fined, convicted of damaging private property, and obliged to cover my repair costs. Barbara ended up moving to a smaller place, drowning in regrets she'll never explicitly voice. Silvio disappeared once he realized there was no more free ride at my expense. Nobody won in a sweet romantic sense, but sometimes peace is enough. Even if it took a push into a pool, a slapped lover, a broken windshield, and a final door slammed in an entitled kid's face to get there, I'll take the outcome. Because now I can breathe, and that's worth everything.